Hello, my name is Dr. Paul O'Brien, and I teach at Mary Immaculate College, University of Limerick, here in Limerick City. And today I'm going to provide an overview of the papers of Commandant Joe Barrett, which we discovered in Kilrush in late 2000 or in summer 2018. So I'm going to talk a little bit about discovering the papers with the Committee of Kilrush District Historical Society, how we saved the papers, our plans for the collection, and of course a little bit about Joe Barrett, his activities during the early 1920s, and also his family a little. So I will go on. So we were invited to, I suppose, view initially the archive in Kilrush by Mr. Joe Sheehan, grandson of Joe Barrett. He had just sold the family house in June, I think, 2018. We had been keeping an eye on the house anyway because the family were traditionally auctioneers and land valuers, and we figured that the archive in the house would be exceptionally rich and very valuable in terms of photographic evidence of houses and property in West Clare. So Joe invited us down. There were a number of us of the committee: Paddy Waldron, Michael Connell, Kay Clancey, and others. And as I said, we expected to be, I suppose, rescuing an auctioneer's archive. So this is the Barrett family home in Moore Street in Kilrush. It's quite close to the square. So how do you save a second generation auctioneering archive? I suppose you have to assemble a crack team, and here are two members of the KDHS committee, Paddy Waldron there, flanked by Michael O'Connell. So we sort of had a day and a half to clear out the house, and as I said, we thought we were rescuing an auctioneer's archive. However, Michael O'Connell had the good idea to pop into the attic. And he tells the story that when he got into the attic, he couldn't see much because there was no light up there. And with his phone, he shone his torch, I suppose, across the attic. And in the far corner, something caught his attention, and it was a framed photograph of Eamon de Valera, so I suppose smiling back at him from across the attic. But also in the attic, he spotted a number of old suitcases and trunks, some of which you can see there in the center photo. Carried those down the stairs and we opened them, and much to our absolute amazement, we found this and more. So what you are looking at here really is a small portion of Joe Barrett's papers, dating from 1916 to circa 1920, 21, thereabouts, perhaps into 23 even. And we could not quite believe what was in the collection. So I'm going to speak a little bit now about Joe Barrett and who he was, his activities from 1916 to about 1923, who his family was, and so forth. So Joe Barrett was born in 1888. His parents were Sylvester Barrett and Johanna Cotter. He had quite a number of siblings there. They are all listed. I won't go through them because I always stumble over them. He married Bridie Ryan of Thurles, and he had three children: Joseph, known as Josh, who lived in the family house in Moore Street, and Maureen and Eileen, who both moved to Dublin and were married there. I think this says everything about the Barrett family's political beliefs. So his mother, Joanna, died in 1943, and part of her obituary I read: all of Mrs. Joanna Barrett's children took part in the War of Independence. Jack took part in the gun running at Hoth, and afterwards joined the French Legion of Honor, where he won the Grand Cross. She was also the mother of the late Commandant Frank Barrett and of Commandant Joe Barrett, who is now on command of the Guard at government buildings in Dublin. Another son is Brother Ignatius Barrett, who accompanied De Valera into Ennis on the occasion of his arrest on the fire at O'Connell Square in August 1923. And that appeared in the Irish press, De Valera's paper, on the 6th of April in 1943. So I think that excerpt of a much larger obituary really tells us about the Barrett family's political beliefs over the course of all of the members of the family. So what did we find? We found countless documents really related to the revolutionary period, about 1916 to 23. Very interesting collection of military pension claims. So Joseph Barrett, I suppose, supported those members, those volunteers who had applied for the military pension and who had been rejected. So they wrote to Joe and a committee in Ennis and in Kilrush, and Joe corroborated their stories. And by doing so, he left a very invaluable record. And we will get to those in a little while. There's a huge collection of photographs from about 1920-22 right up to 1936 of Joe and his comrades, of Joe and his family, of Joseph with De Valera and so forth. And I'll show you a number of those photographs presently. There's also a typed 5-page account of Liam Lynch's death in 1923, written by an individual who was on the scene. There are any number of political pamphlets, and I suppose much later into the 20th century, there are documents related to Ireland during the emergency period, documents related to the formation of the Irish Army and the Navy, of which Joe Barrett was instrumental, and countless family papers and photographs. So a little bit about Joe and where he came from. So Joe, in 1955, when Joe was putting together his military pension claim, he recounted his early years. I was born in February 1888 at Barnagia, Dara, Ennis, County Clare. I am the eldest of a family of 16. I worked on my father's farm after leaving Cologne National School. At present, I practice as an auctioneer in the town of Kilrush. So, for those of you not from these parts of the woods, so you can see there on that excerpt from a Google map, the location of Barnagia, just outside Dara, a couple of miles from Ennis. The photo there on the right shows the Barrett homestead and shop as it appeared, I think, probably in the 1930s or into the 40s. And I think that is probably Joe Barrett's mother there, with 3 of her grandchildren. And that's a wonderful record of the original shopfront, which is no longer extant. So his formative years. Joseph Barrett joined the IRB on the 15th of August in 1908, and he had stated that his father was an old Fenian. Joe Barrett became a member of the Irish Volunteers in 1913. By 1916, he was a captain in the IRB. In August 1920, Barrett was appointed to command the Mid Clare Brigade. And as I said, his day job was a rate collector and an auctioneer in the family premises there in Moore Street in Kilrush. And in 1922, Joe married Bridie Ryan of Thurles. This is a very interesting photograph. You can see De Valera in the back left there, flanked by members of the Barrett family and some other members of whom we can't quite identify. This is a very large photograph. It is printed on board and it is about 1 meter square. And we think this was probably in a frame at some stage and perhaps on display in the Barrett household. And this we found underneath the trunks in the attic. So again, all of this would have been lost had Joe Sheehan not invited us down to view the contents of the house just after he sold it. I should say as well, I suppose, the extent of the collection of which we are still cataloguing is up around probably 250 to 280 archival boxes. So an enormous collection altogether, which would have been lost without Joe Sheehan and his sister Mary inviting us down to save the archive. So early activities, again, this is from Joe Barrett's witness statement, which he made in 1955, and I quote, "Local agitation for the acquisition of land by the Land Commission. Estates that had been in the hands of landlords against whom there was a traditional hostility. They were mostly of planter stock and invariably were opposed to every Irish national movement." So Joe wrote this in 1955, and it really provides, I suppose, a thorough and a deep insight into his politics and how he felt about the struggle for freedom from his youth into the 1920s. These are his medals, which we have been kindly loaned by Joe and Mary for the exhibition, which is currently running in Kilrush Library. And these two medals are part of that display in Kilrush Library. So at the end of 1918, Clare was divided into 3 brigade areas: East Clare, Mid Clare and West Clare. And this is a note again from a document which we found, which Joe had written sometime in the 1940s. The 3 brigade commanders were appointed at that meeting: Michael Brennan to command the East Clare Brigade, my brother Frank Barrett to command the Mid Clare Brigade, and I forget who was given a charge in West Clare. I was not present at that meeting, but I was appointed a brigade adjunct of the Mid Clare Brigade at that meeting. So he scribbled on the note. Later, I was appointed CO of the Mid Clare Brigade. So this is a hand-drawn map of, I suppose, the area covered by the Mid Clare Brigade. Again, it is rather large, drawn from memory, I guess, but probably not contemporaneous to the 1920s, possibly drawn sometime in the 1940s or 50s. So that is the original map on the left-hand side. And at the right-hand side there, I mapped all of those spots and points onto a Google map, which I can make available if people want to explore it themselves. But again, it shows the wide area of land which these men had to cover within their area. So Civil War, there's a huge amount of files related to the Civil War period. Ughlan Heron files. There's over 100 documents in manuscript form. I'll show you a few in a moment. They largely date from January to May 1923. They include a series of orders from General Headquarters in Dublin. They describe the pro-treaty side as terrorists, and they're mostly signed with initials only. And the files, I think it's fair to say, ascribe a state legitimacy to the anti-treaty side. And topics covered range from the collection of rates to the execution of spies. Some of them are quite chilling, in fairness. So let's look at a few. This is Operation Order number 16, and it was posted on the 26th of January 1923, and the subject is Senators, and it states list of senators to be killed if, quote, any of our prisoners of war are executed. Factories owned by the above named are not to be destroyed. Anti-treaty forces disapproved of the new chamber and of 30 of the 37 members, and 37 members had their homes burned. The new Senate contained 7 peers, a dowager countess, 5 baronets, and a few knights as well. This is another order. This is sorry, I beg your pardon. This is the list of senators. This is just an excerpt from it, so we can see there at the top the Earl of Dunraven. So we get his full name, his full title, his home addresses, and his clubs. The next one down there is Sir Talbot Everett up in Meath. Again, we get his address. We get the clubs of which he is a member, and in brackets there, if you can see, we have IMP and FM. So IMP is imperialist, and FM, I think, is a Freemason. So they really had a lot of information on these individuals. And this is a couple of those gentlemen named. Order number 2 concerns spies, and it noted that we are conferring powers on the brigade commandant to ratify sentences of execution. And that one there is dated the 31st of January 1923. And that document is on display in Kilrush Library at the moment. Order number 17 concerned treachery, and it says any volunteer who surrenders himself or any to the enemy will be tried by court-martial, and if convicted will be shot. And again, that is dated the 8th of March 1923. And another one about executions. So reprisals are much more effective if carried out on the same day as executions. So again, a chilling order, and one I think that brings home the savagery of the period. And again, just I suppose reiterate that all of these documents and manuscripts would have been lost had the Sheehan and Clegg family not invited us in to rescue them. This one concerns petrol mines. One petrol mine thrown into an ordinary dwelling house will completely wreck the interior. So it goes on to state that the explosion will, I suppose, blow upwards and wreck the entire interior. And it gives instructions on how to build these and how to make these petrol mines at home and when on the run. A most interesting manuscript is this notebook, which contains reconnaissance reports. For instance, this one here, Officer Training Camp IRA Tubber, 6th to the 9th, 21, to Commandant Burke OC Reconnaissance Report number 1. And this is what they, I suppose, recorded. C Company, the scanner, the captain is M. Guthrie, the first lieutenant is James Nestor, the second lieutenant is Peter Scales. The number of the roll included 3 officers and 28 men. There were about 100 or so pages in this notebook, and it has survived remarkably intact. When I met Joe Sheehan and Mary Clegg at the weekend in Kilrush Library, they told me that their mother said that when she and her siblings were children, they were never allowed into the attic, and they never played with the attic. So, I suppose that's another reason why the material has survived intact. There was nobody drawing on it, or perhaps making paper airplanes with it. So that one of the main reasons, I guess, that the material has survived in such good condition. This is another interesting note from that notebook. They were planning an ambush. It doesn't say which ambush, I believe, for this particular one, but one can imagine, making a list of what we might need for an overnight trip somewhere. It included 2 stoves, a frying pan, a bucket, a basin, a ground sheet, a kettle, and some oil. And these are the gentlemen who went on this particular mission. We have a J. Coffey and a D. Coonahan, which you can see their names there. For the operation, again, very, very interesting notes, as you can see there. 6 first-class snipers to be trained for night work, 6 riflemen then on the north wall, 2 on the south wall, 2 on the east wall, an engineering party at the main gate, 8 squads of 4 men with revolvers and bombs on the northwest wall or gate, 8 squads of 4 men with revolvers and bombs on the southwest gate, and 1 engineering party for the interior. So that gives an overview into the planning stage, I guess, of perhaps an assault on a barracks or on a checkpoint or something, or on some type of building. It's very interesting. To me, it seems as though the notebook was perhaps on somebody's knee, because the writing is a little lopsided, and it's a little messy, if you like. And perhaps these notes were taken out in the field, or perhaps taken in a very rushed scenario. But nevertheless, they shed real good and rich insight and detail into the planning stages of an operation. Also contains, as I mentioned, in the archive, our military service pension files, and these are particularly interesting and fascinating. There are several hundred files that concern men and women who took part. They include detailed personal testimony, and they cover appeals, rejections, and additional evidence which Joe Barrett and his team I suppose, told people, go in and have a think about it and write absolutely everything down. And scenarios like that are referenced throughout the letters. The date range of the letters are from 1923 right up to 1968. People were still appealing for the pensions. Within the larger file, we have lists of individuals and the companies in which they served, and the operations in which they took part. Thankfully, speaking as a historian, this part of the archive is fantastic, because Joe Barrett subsequently typed everything up. So we have a very easy to read collection. I normally work in 19th century archival material, which is invariably handwritten. It also contains details of people who emigrated. So there are a lot of addresses from the UK, from America, Australia, Canada, and even a couple from throughout mainland Europe. This is just a collection, as you can see from some of them. As I said, most of them are typed, which makes the job of work much easier. And let's have a look at a few of them. So this is the account of Mrs. Jane Clancey from Ballymacraven, Kilshanny, up there in North Clare. And it states, for the period the 1st of April 1919 to the 31st of March 1920, I cared for Vice Brigadier Peadar O'Loughlin, wounded at the Sheshamore ambush, washing, mending and catering. On average, 6 volunteers were billeted at her home. I cared for Battalion Officer Ignatius O'Neill, who was wounded at Crow's ambush in February 1920. I assisted Vice Brigadier Martin Devitt. I often had to care for arms of officers, catering of meals for the column who took part in the capture of ruined barracks in October 1918. Mr. John ORourke was writing to claim his pension. He was writing from Morris Avenue in the Bronx in New York, and he lists his battalion as the 2nd Battalion MCB in Lisicasey. So it states Joe Barrett is writing in support of his application, and Joe writes, this applicant joined the volunteers in 1917, taking an active part in the East Clare election and the following military operations: the Decomade ambush in July 1920, the disarming of police in June 1920, the capture of Rowan Barracks in October 1920, the Caharay ambush in January 1921, the Crows cross ambush in February 1921, and other sniping activities along the Ennis-Kilrush Road. And as you can see, it's signed Shenna Lamash, Joe Barrett, Town Hall, Ennis, the 7th of March 1921. This is an example of a claim of extra evidence. This concerns Patrick Flanagan, Crusheen, and I'll just read it in case a little difficult to make out. Patrick Flanagan, Captain, Crusheen Company Battalion, the 11th of July 1921, was active as follows. So he took an active part in the Rouen Barracks, Operation Spencel Hill and My Risk, camps and barracks during the truce period, 1922, attacked Crusheen Barracks, August 1922, and minor engagements, arrested and released after a short period. His health being very poor at the time. And that, as you can see there, is dated 1935, and it's signed by Sean O'Keefe, and I think that is an E. Hennessy. And as I said, there are lists and lists of men. So this is P Company Dura, the critical date, the 11th of July 1921. And we can see all these men's names. So for instance, there we have Captain Thomas Hogan with an address in Charleville. If we go down the list there, we can see James Clohessy, who is now living in the USA. Go down a little bit, there are a couple of gentlemen who had passed away, Thomas Mangan and John M. Killeen. And down even further there, we can see people in Ennis, Dura, Clarecastle, and so forth. But on that list alone, there were 3 men who had emigrated to the United States. These are appeal cases. Joe Barrett was a fantastic, I suppose, administrator, and everything is typed, everything is searchable. This is Windows before Windows was invented, in a sense, and you can see his training. So the Mid Clare Brigade, sheet 2, we have Michael Malone of Crag and Lahinch, and question of rank involved, statement awaited from Captain Barrett. So more appeal cases. Each appeal case got a number, and we get the person's name, their address, and why the appeal is being challenged, or what further evidence is required. And as you can see there, you can see Captain Barrett, his name all over everything. So he was helping out these men and women to achieve their full pension. I should say as well that Joe Barrett himself, for all of his hard work, did not receive his full pension. I think he got 2 3/4 of it or something like that, but he certainly did not himself receive his own entire pension. So it was seemingly very difficult to receive the full pension, and rank in many cases does not seem to have been evidence enough of your contribution during the period. Again, a lot of Common Amon appeals. This one is an appeal on behalf of Mrs. Lily Byrne Kilrush, formerly Lily O'Donoghue of Lackeen, Kilfenora. Cara, I am directed by Mr. O'Grady, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Lands, to enclose herewith a communication received from Mr. Bertie Wallace relative to the application of Mrs. Lily Byrne Kilrush for a Common Amon pension. So again, very interesting documents. That particular one is dated during the emergency period in 1942. Other interesting items in the archive are hand-drawn maps of a number of ambushes from 1920-21. These, I don't believe, were probably drawn in 1920, for instance, and were probably drawn from memory as part of appeal cases for the pension. However, I'm I would be certain that they are pretty accurate if they're drawn by individuals who took part in these ambushes. This one shows a map of the Monreale ambush, which took place on the 18th of December 1920. And as you can see there from the detail, we get where the IRA positions were, where we get where the enemy positions were, and I suppose some indication of the topography and where individuals would be hiding as they took part in the ambush. So the Barrett family and the Mulcahy family are linked through marriage and friendship. Lieutenant General Patrick Anthony Mulcahy married first in January 1923, Josephine Barrett. She died in May 1935. She was the daughter of the anti-treaty Sylvester Barrett and his wife Joanna of Ennis, and they had 5 children. He married secondly in April 1939, Pauline Barrett, who was Josephine's sister. And that wonderful photograph there, as you can see, shows Josephine Barrett, who, as I said, died in 1935. And that photograph was given to me by Olive Mulcahy, Lieutenant General's daughter, whom I met in Dublin with Yvonne McNamara, and we had a great afternoon discussing the family history, and Olive has a fantastic and very in-depth knowledge of her family history. So it's been great to meet various members of the Barrett family, some of whom have come to Mary I, where the archive is held, and some of whom I have met in Ennis and in Dublin, and of course in West Clare. The archive contains, as I said, a large number of Barrett family photographs. The central photograph here, as far as I understand, shows Joe Barrett's parents and a family member, and these, I think, are 3 of the Barrett girls. This photograph is very interesting, and I'm nearly finished at this stage. So this photograph shows a young child in a chair at the back, possibly of the Barrett house in Kilrush, or perhaps the Barrett house in Dara. The child has a lovely, friendly smile on her face, I think. She's flanked by a rather tall planter in which there is a plant. However, pinned to the planter, there is a notice. And when one zooms in on that notice, we are left with no doubt as to the family's politics. So you can very clearly see there, pinned to the planter, it states "Up the Republic." So I think that is very telling indeed. As I mentioned, Joe Barrett's 61-page statement to the Bureau of Military History is available on the fantastic website, bureauofmilitaryhistory.ie. Joe recorded that statement in December 1955, and that is available online and very much worth reading and digging into. So thank you very much for your time indeed. If you'd like to learn some more about the Barrett material, you're very welcome to either email me directly or email Kilrush Historical Society or visit our website. And I will say that our plans for the archive is to partner with a third-level institution, catalogue and digitize the material and make it available to researchers. As I said, because of the current situation, everything has been delayed, and it is difficult to have people to come on campus to view the material just at the moment. Hopefully this will change in the future, and people will be able to come along and view the material, particularly if family members are mentioned, or perhaps people may be working on books and articles or other such publications. So thank you very much for your time indeed.